The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome into another edition of the Bill Clark Show, presented by Buffalo Rock Dr. Pepper. Molly Robinson, I'm Pat Smith, along with Coach Bill Clark. And Coach Clark, the last few weeks on this show, we've kind of talked about Brennan Sorsby. The good news is we do not have to talk about that anymore.
Well, I think pressure, public pressure from other schools, whatever that was, you got to give, there was a decision made, to go in another direction, which I think for the good of our game, I think a lot of people are excited about.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact now he has declared for the supplemental draft, so he will get another opportunity to continue to play football.
Absolutely, and I think that was our point. This is not, there's no hate of this young man. Give him this other chance. Heck, pay for his education. Whatever that needs to be, this is just a rule that had to be enforced.
Yeah. It is interesting, Coach, because this time of the year, we're already seeing commitments around college football. And you and I were talking about before we came on the air, just this time of the year, how crazy it used to be. And when you were the head coach at UAB, and they've got a very interesting perspective to this year's recruiting class. Rodney Orr from Tider Insider, who we have on Three Man Front every Thursday, he told us about a month ago, and it shocked us because we didn't really realize it, but he said, don't be shocked if Alabama only signs 12, 13, maybe 14 guys in this upcoming recruiting class. Well, now that the calendar has turned, many Alabama fans are looking at those recruiting rankings, and they see that Auburn and Alex Golesh, they're putting a lot of guys, verbal commitments on the books. They're a top 10 recruiting class, but Bama dead last in the SEC, but everybody's telling us that they're not going to sign a lot of guys. That's a very interesting philosophy to have. Kind of take us there in regards to Kalen DeBoer wanting to retain guys as opposed to going and signing 24, 25 guys.
Well, I think when you say, if we just look at past history, and I'm not just here to defend Alabama, as we know, it's just, all right, let's just talk about the facts. There's proof in recruiting prowess. They've recruited year after year. I think he's shown he's a good recruiter. They have the means to recruit. Let's not forget that. The idea that I'm going to take what I've got, we did a good job and we got these guys. So let's look at the team that was the most successful last year. And what did we all say? They were a team. You had a mixture of guys who had been in this system before, right, that traveled to Indiana. They handpicked some guys, the quarterback and some other guys to bring in. Alabama's still signing guys, but to take the guys we have and we're going to develop them and we can keep them. We have the money to, so they're choosing to keep these guys. They're choosing to develop them, which I love. I'm a development guy. I'm a guy that feels like if you're in our system and how we train, the belief, the team, the working together with the other teammates, this is the ultimate team sport. I think they're seeing that's what worked last year for a team, not maybe necessarily just like this, but that's what worked for them. And if we believe we're good coaches and we believe that the team and being on in our system is important, that's what you do.
It's interesting, though, Coach, because you've lived in this state, you grew up in this state, you coached in this state, you understand the fandom.
Yep.
And the fans, since Nick Saban arrived in Tuscaloosa, and even with Kalen DeBoer the last 2 years, had a number 3 rated class, number 2 rated class in the top 25. They're not used to seeing Alabama being 15 or 16 in a 16-team conference. How's that going to go well, and how do you kind of explain that to the fans to be patient?
Yeah, I think, one, you do explain it. And I think there's two schools of thought. There's always been this, well, this is just how we do it. And then I think there's my theory, which I think is the new theory. We're going to do what's best for us to win. I've already decided it. We've met, we've talked, we've discussed, we looked at every angle. But also we have fans for a reason. They're important. They pay for our salaries. Now, all that being said, just explain it. Now, once you've explained it, though, it is what it is, and you just got to be able to go with it. But success, and that's what we've always said, success breeds, you know what you're doing. Not having success breeds, you're an idiot. So that's what's going to happen with this situation. If they don't have success, that's when things like this come up because they're different. But you can't really use that, in my opinion, because, how long have we been doing what we're doing now? There's not this huge track record of going and rechanging this roster. What they've been doing It's not been horrible,
Yeah.
but it hadn't been great.
Yeah.
Into to the normal standards of what we're used to. And so I think they're using, what did Indiana do? What did that look like? What were our deficiencies, which I think was the lack of development and lack of team cohesion to win it all, which is the only goal for them.
And as a coach, and you kind of told me this before we went on the air, is that the luxury for Kalen DeBoer is that he got a new contract.
Yeah.
And that if anybody out there thinks that they're going to run Kalen DeBoer off
Right.
after a less than spectacular season in Tuscaloosa, Greg Byrne, the athletic director, is saying something different. So you know that this might be, let's say, a roll of the dice
Yep.
from a philosophy standpoint in recruiting.
Yep.
He has the backing of the athletics department, putting full trust in him in this philosophy.
Well, I think as we've had to figure out what does this world look like, what really is going on if we turn our roster over every year. I mean, because that's all you're doing. You're getting one of my guys and I'm getting one of your guys. Versus, I've got guys that are talented that just need to be trained. You know, and I was talking to a person everybody would know who's got a son who's a really good quarterback coming up, and we were talking about the signing an SEC scholarship as a quarterback or going to another school where you play immediately, because that's what they're looking for now is quarterbacks that can play. So we're talking about two different things, I know, but my point on that is, what is the world we're in now? Now, if we got some sense and we cut down on the number of transfers, you'd have to relook at it. But right now, at that position, maybe you do go play. You go get playing time in because that's what these schools are looking for. And they go out and go, wow, I've seen him. Now, stop that to say what we're talking about is totally different. We're talking about a team. We got really good, talented players. Develop them versus going to get them from somebody else. But you're also bringing baggage, because you don't really know who that guy is. Now, when you have no choice, you do what you got to do. But when I feel like I've got really talented guys, I know who they are. I just want to develop them and I want to keep them. I think that philosophy is good. I would say, though, if that's your philosophy, let everybody know. And once you've told them, it is what it is.
Yeah. Not to mention the fact that these NIL deals are not public knowledge. So we don't know if, a couple of your freshmen that you brought in last year's class, that maybe you signed them to a multi-year deal as opposed to a 1 year situation, and where you say, okay, I've got just like you would an NFL team. I've got accelerators in the deal.
Yeah.
Whereas, okay, as a freshman, we're paying you this, but you stay here your sophomore year, you're going to hit this number.
Right.
So you sign them to a multi-year deal to where you know that they're going to be on your roster unless they're injured or something else happens.
Yeah, and these ranking systems don't even allow for that. I think there was a place before when you knew you needed that number one, number two, number three, number four. I mean, that was important, and you wanted to keep that going. This is a different story. It's all based on how many you're taking, when you're not taking as many, obviously that's going to drop you down. So you've got to factor all that. It's a new world. Who was the best team out there? Why were they the best team out there? That's what coaching looks like every year, whether we're looking at offense, defensive, special teams trends. You got to look at recruiting trends. You got to look at roster management trends. What does this world of NIL look like? And that's what they're doing. Talk
to us about perception versus reality when it comes to recruiting rankings, because I know we've talked to you about it before in the past. When you were at UAB, you had, whether it was certain coaches or recruiting services say, okay, this kid was this, but you guys had a different evaluation, because obviously you're not recruiting kids based on what somebody sitting in Murfreesboro, Tennessee has to say about a kid. It's your relationship with that kid and the need that you have on that football team. Yeah, need and projection. And, of course, this projection now there would be this worry of who else could go get this guy, but the need and the projection was everything. What is his background? What is his history? How was he coached? Why is he raw? Why is he, for us, why was he lesser? Versus those guys that are looking for the 5-star. The difference now, obviously, I can go out on a film and watch this guy that I'm going to get transferred from this other school in really good competition, but he's in another system. I still think the plug and play of a few guys, obviously, is going to happen. We got a real need at depth at corner. Let's go get a guy. So you're trying to supplement your roster. Absolutely, and that's fine. I think everybody would do that. Based on need, based on depth, whatever that is.
But the idea of having a core group of guys that are my guys that have been with us, that believe in us, that's everything. I mean, because it just gets so hard. It's just so hard week in, week out, and there's so much toughness and resiliency and things that are brought together by the fact that these guys are together and bond. It's, there's so many things you can do with OTAs and training, and you can do a lot of good things with that. And I've lived that world. But I sure would like to have them for an extra year or 2 years. I would like to have that time with them together. Plus, I know who they are. Mm-hmm. So, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, but I can see where they're coming from.
Well, I think based on this conversation we've had over the last 10 minutes that I would think that if you were in the same situation as Kalen DeBoer, you probably would be attacking it the same way that he potentially is attacking it this year.
Yeah, I think that's that. And, we talked about my philosophy has always been, I thought the way we practiced, trained was better. I just did, because that was my background, and I thought our teamwork, our cohesion, our work ethic, our stadium work or whatever it was, I thought that was going to win in the end. And when you felt like you're kind of an A to Z team, I always said, there may be a better offensive coach, there may be a better defensive coach, but I wanted to be the guy that could put it all together. And I think if you believe in your system and what that is, this would be the route to go. The guys that have been in the system and believed. Now they have to have talent. The good thing for these guys, they got talent. Mm-hmm. They went out and got great guys based on, theoretically based on their rankings, and they've got to say, we picked this guy for a reason. There's a reason we picked him. He fit our system. Obviously just as we talk about Alabama, we know they got to run the ball better and some of those things. But I think this idea would be something I would embrace.
When you think about when you were back and you were recruiting, and then the changes that we've had happen the last 4 to 5 years, you talk to these coaches on a daily basis. How big has it been only now having one transfer portal? Has that been a game changer?
It's been a game changer for them. I think every guy's a competitor goes, man, I would have liked to have had, and they say it laughingly, boy, it sure would have been good for me to be able to go out and get a guy, but I sure wouldn't want to worry about losing all my other ones.
I was going to say, I would hate during the middle of the season, I've got to go recruit a locker room.
I mean, that would be like saying something like, when I get struck by lightning. I mean, don't even say it.
Yes.
Because but they're all like to a man. I mean, I get to coach football. I get to focus on my players. I get to focus on training.
I get to go to the nuts and bolts of why I'm here.
Correct. I get to be a real coach again versus just a manager and that's the stupidest thing that's ever been too poor. I mean, it's the dumbest idea that's ever been. Thank God they at least fixed. I mean, of course, who knows? They could try and bring it back at some, but the coaches are happy. I know that.
Yeah. I mean, just alleviating that pressure because, one thing that you heard a lot when seasons start going the wrong direction and you're trying to hold and you're trying to make sure the boat doesn't capsize. And listening to Hugh Freeze last year talking about how, once again, you're in there, not only talking about the game that just took place and you're disappointed, but now you've got to worry about that 5-star kid over here that potentially could poison the well water because he's not happy. And what kind of, am I going to get full effort out of him the rest of the year? And then I'm worried about, I need to hold on to these 2 other guys that potentially is going to come back next year. I can't even imagine having to do with that.
Yeah, and so you've got that coming. You got the one portal coming, but at least I get through that. And I think
you can breathe a little easier.
It's like saying I'm going to go on a 2-week vacation after I work, 120 hours a week. Just having some light at the end of the tunnel for the sanity of these guys and just once again, the good of the game, people stealing guys, going to watch. Let me go watch your spring game so I can steal people off your roster. It was just the worst of the worst. So we've at least made that change. I think obviously there's some other good thoughts out there. I'm praying that we can get to some of those ideas, but I think that one change alone is just is so much better for them and for the coaches and just their sanity.
Let's talk about the best of the best, and that is Webb Concrete and Building Supplies, one of the best in the state.
Yeah, boy, just to hear, I get to talk to my son all the time about what happens with Webb and how they take care of their customers and the fact now they've got all the different Of course, he's in Florida, but all the different needs for whether it's commercial or residential. Check our guys out at Webb. They do a great job.
Coach, the Protect College Sports Act, the bill by Senators Cruz and Cantwell, that is on top of Capitol Hill. They continue to have discussions on what potentially is going to happen moving forward. You're getting the sides divided. You've got Major League Baseball, the NFL, the Players Associations all coming out in support. You do have the SEC and the Big Ten. They're opposed to the current bill because they do not want the rights of their media to be pulled for the other conferences. But I wanted to talk to you because with you being in charge of Coach Safely, you guys have had to deal with a lot of the political aspects from statewide and federal governments. And if you would, just kind of peel the curtain back a little bit, because there's so much that goes into these bills and the things that you've had to have done to have passed and what you're currently working on. Kind of take us there from that perspective.
Yeah, so of course we had the Alabama law passed in 2018. I'm coaching during that time. We had the reiteration, where we added some teeth to it. Not this year, but the year before last. But going into Louisiana, we got a resolution passed in Georgia, but seeing that go from a resolution in Louisiana to the law passed with which is shocking. Maybe just kind of talks against what we're saying here, but we had everybody on board. We had Republicans and Democrats.
So there was no dissenting
which
opinions
is insane,
and things of that. Yeah.
Which who doesn't want to keep kids safe, so they'll play. But to get to the people to make that decision, so first, who will carry this bill? Who is the person that carries this bill that actually even understands it?
So the sponsor, basically.
Who is the sponsor of this bill? So finding the right for us, the senator, who was somebody that was trustworthy, who understood it and had a heart for what we were talking about, kids and sports, which, Senator Edmonds from Louisiana had coached his kids. He coached his boys all the way through, till high school. In fact, he hadn't even helped coach junior high. So he was very interested in the fact that we had Governor Landry that decided with his way he felt about Dr. Andrews, wanted to get involved. So, but to see all that come together, all right, now let's go to Texas. What's happening in Texas? What's the dynamic? As we talked to Governor Braun in Indiana, what's that dynamic? Obviously if you can start with the governor, that's a big deal. But as these guys get involved in things that they think, and it's just like opinions, we got everybody's for it, but why are you against this? What's your reasoning for not liking this? So first we found a problem, which is what's going on with college athletics, which, as we know, the lack of controls, right, and we know all the bad things. But I think the fact that somebody has been willing to take a hold of this, because really if we go back to the history of this, our media, and I always say our media was very good to me through the years, but media and politicians got involved in everything really with NIL. That was a we're not taking care of our kids, and the fact that spiraled into where we are now with automatic eligibility, transfer all you want, and but that was a media and politicians that did that, and so I think just on that alone, I think we've got to try and listen to all sides, but you got to come up with something, and you got to put something out there. And that's kind of with us. Every state with Coach Safely law will have a little bit different iteration of what they want to do. Hey, here's what we did in Alabama and it's worked. We've trained over 70,000 coaches. We've impacted over 1 million kids. It's in Arkansas, but there's going to be a slightly different tone to it. And how that goes. And so we understand that. I think give these guys credit for putting something out there. I think what we need for maybe say the SEC, we love everything about it, but we want to control our market value or whatever that is. But I think we all know something's got to be done, and I give those guys credit for putting something out.
Well, it's interesting because what you guys have done, and it started here in the state of Alabama, because when you can go to the governor and the governor is all about it, and then it is a bipartisan issue.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not something that folks are going to be yelling and screaming at.
Yeah, I don't think this is 80-20. I think this is
I mean,
100. 99 to 1 or 100 to 0.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's always going to be one person that you can't make happy in a bill. But you guys were able to take that template in the state of Alabama, and now you've applied it to the surrounding states, and hopefully before it's all said and done, it's going to be nationwide.
Yeah, I think for us, it's like who are we talking to here? We're talking to parents. So for every Kirby Smart, who I love and appreciate, and maybe when we go to Louisiana, we got Orgeron or Mulkey or whoever these folks are from LSU. I also want the dad and the mom who's coaching these kids. Who, I just don't want something that's, well, you're not talking to me,
right?
And as we put these videos out, we're talking sub 14, so it's got to be things that fit my grandkids who are 7 and 5, almost 8, and and girls soccer. And so it's got to fit the demographic of who we're talking to. So something that gets their attention, and these college coaches who are willing to help with that is important. But I've also got to make sure I'm telling the story to the mom, because we want her to say, hey, I want my child playing. I want to make sure they're safe, so they will play, so I can't keep them out there.
Just speaking of the state of Alabama, how you use the state of Alabama as an example when you go to Louisiana and Indiana and these other states. Just kind of talk about that a minute. Just the support that you got from the home states before you guys could launch it everywhere else.
Well, first we had, as we were trying to get to what does this look like? Is this, we don't have trainers at all these local places, and what do they do if a child has a heat stroke or whatever? Using this model that Dr. Andrews created and as Jack kind of helped formulate this idea. Very appreciative to the guys that were on those early teams, Nick and Bruce Pearl and Gus, and I was on there, and we had tennis and soccer. We had everybody represent, all of our sports represent as we told that story. Jabbo Wagner getting so far behind, we could list the names. There's been so many people, but to get that to be the first was a big deal. Now we've got the proof in the pudding, with our partnership with Alabama Park and Rec Association. Once again, same story. If we go over to Georgia, huge Park and Rec Association. They have over 100,000 coaches.
Wow.
I mean, that's not counting all our travel ball and all that. They've got over 100,000 coaches. Louisiana, on the other hand, doesn't. They're trying to, they're talking to Natalie Norman, who heads our Park and Rec Association. Hey, what are y'all doing? How do you do that there? So there's going to be so much growth in this of helping Park and Rec associations. And, obviously the travel ball issue is out there. And once again, this is not to keep people from participating, being part of this, is to do it. Once again, we got the new app, which is the game changer for us. You go to the website, you get the app, you load the app up, can get to it on your phone, the AI model that you're about to be able to ask questions. The videos we're about to put out, we've got a number of videos. Things like, when should my child start lifting weights?
Yeah.
What does that look like? What is movement versus lifting? And as somebody that got hurt lifting, of course I was, 15 years old at the time, but what does that look like? What does practice organization look like? All those things, I think, that are not just safety, but just best practice. I think all that, getting to be able to put all that in there together is really fun.
Well,
Exciting.
it's like you said, when you talk about Coach Safely and what you guys are trying to do across the country, this is not like something that's a big debate as opposed to this Protect College Sports Act, because there's money attached to it. And when there's money attached to it, then you start fishing in other people's ponds, and they get very protective, like you see about the Big Ten and the SEC. So hopefully somewhere there'll be a middle ground that they'll be able to get to. But I just thought that would be a fascinating conversation, because a lot of people, they hear the word politics are involved, but I mean, even at the level that you have to try to get stuff done with something that everybody should be for with kids' safety, there's still a level of politics involved.
Well, and I think it was like, well, what, is this going to keep them from playing? How, what if we can't get to the Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Or, and I think those are decent questions that are asked. And it's like I used to say in recruiting, I want to make it where you can't say no. I want to answer who the coaches are, what's our facility look like, what kind of education you're going to get, are we going to win, how are you trained, do you have a chance to play in the NFL? And you eliminate the no's by doing it the right way and doing the right things. And I think that's the point I want to make, is how do we get it to these people? And you answer those questions before you go into those meetings of, we're going to make it where you got to do this. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. CoachSafely.org and the app. Download that today. Coach, SmartBank, another great sponsor here at the Bill Clark Show.
Yeah, we appreciate our guys at SmartBank and their sponsorship. It goes without saying, if you just look and see what's happened in just the recent history of the bank and really the surrounding, as I get to see the history. I had a call. We were on a board meeting last week, and it was interesting to hear kind of the economist for smart banking. You're like, well, they have an economist, but kind of the guy that looks at it, tying oil, we talk some politics here, but oil prices to the stock market and to the bank. So you got some really smart people running that bank, but you got just good people. Like I said, you're going to get treated just like a big bank with all the amenities, with all the small bank feel.
I wanted to ask you, are you a soccer fan?
I like soccer.
Did you play soccer?
I did not play soccer. As an AD at Prattville, I don't say I love every second of watching the whole game. There can be some boring parts to me, just being honest. But when you have the crowds and you have the USA and especially these big matches, I guess I'd say the same thing about tennis, where I probably could watch a football game, almost whoever's playing. Tennis at Wimbledon.
And people are like that with golf.
Yeah.
Or with NASCAR. They'll say, you know what, I'll watch Dega or I'll watch Daytona.
Big events.
But they may not watch it every single week.
And that's what I'd say about soccer. When I feel like there's...
And by the way, people say that about... I'm a baseball guy, but people say that about baseball. Like, I'll watch it come World Series.
That's right.
Or playoffs.
That's right. So there's a few out there that you could probably watch at all times. And then I would put soccer in that category of this... when there's this much on the line, and Wrexham came out and you had because then you were pulling for the town.
Yeah.
You're not just pulling, the soccer was just really an extension of the town, and that made it cool, which is kind of what we're talking about with the World Cup, where it's really countries, and that's fun to watch.
Oh, no, it's been great so far, and USA loves winners.
Well, the patriotism we've seen, the national anthems, obviously we couldn't be much more patriotic than we are here. So just proud to watch our country and for all the negatives you see out there, man, we got a lot of great things going. Very blessed.
No doubt about it. That's another edition of the Bill Clark Show presented by Buffalo Rock, Dr. Pepper. For Molly Robinson, I'm Pat Smith. That's Coach Bill Clark. We'll see you next time on the Coach Bill Clark Show presented by Buffalo Rock, Dr. Pepper.
This has been the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.